YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. This is the space of social media. That's what we're going to talk about today. In addition, we're going to touch on artificial intelligence technology and how these things potentially could affect the mental health of our youth. And for this, I'm joined by Adelina Brisbois. Thank you, Adelina, for being here. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Adelina is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's the Chief Clinical Officer at Engage Treatment Program with offices in Westlake Village and Agora Hills. She has, for the last 16 or 17 years, been in the space of having been a school counselor, a child and adolescent therapist, now a clinical director. So she has good experience to bring to this conversation. And between us, we're going to have a chat about the pros and the cons, but especially what parents need to know in terms of potential harms, warning signs, and tips for how you can manage these for your children. So thanks again for being here.
I'm always happy to talk to you.
Oh, likewise. We have great conversations, and so this is fun. Thank you. I guess I thought I would start by just, I defined what social media is. It's really mainly those four platforms, and they really are a space that can be used for a lot of good for kids. I mean, there are areas where these are vehicles for kids posting content, looking and responding to other content, so creativity, things like that, sharing information, learning, right? But like anything, there are pros and cons. You mentioned just before we got started filming is that it's ironic that we're using social media right now to have this conversation, so it can be used for good, right?
Yeah.
Right? I was fascinated by a recent study that showed that, first of all, about 95% of teens use social media. All right. About a third of them say they use it almost constantly, right? And then even though a lot of these platforms are designed for ages 13 on up, there about 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds have used social media. So it's not just a teenager thing, right? And then one more thing to toss out there before we dive in is that teenagers were surveyed and they said that about half of them, pretty close, thought that social media had mostly negative effects on their peers. But when you take a deep dive, they didn't feel that way about their own use. So that's kind of the foundation. So let's start by talking a little bit more about the positives. What do you see as benefits for our kids using social media?
Yeah, I think when they're modeled and they're taught to use it responsibly, I think that they can gain so much from it. Like they can build community, right? Have access to people that they don't maybe see on a daily basis. We talked about family, right? Like grandparents that live far or cousins. And I also think there's different types of social media. I think kids don't use social media the way adults do. So Facebook is one that kids don't really use. It's more adults that use it, even professionals that use it as resources. But kids, I think, want to learn from each other. And I think it just depends, what are they learning about? If they're learning about science or innovation or, a character in a book that they love, then that's great. But if they're learning about something that's harmful, then of course that's harmful. Just like with anything. If you're going to read a book about something that's dangerous, then it's going to be dangerous. So I think it has to do with us being involved with the interaction of social media and less about like specific times and restrictions. And it's not a one size fits all. Every kid is not the same. Some kids take special interest and want to learn more. And other kids really want to use it more as a way to compare or connect with other peers.
So learning, being creative, social connection, especially to those that are not easily accessible, like in your school or in your neighborhood. And I guess I would even toss out there, I've seen some uses where some children or teens, I guess I'll say teens, have kind of special interests or special needs to connect to people that are not in their immediate community. Like I think of the LGBTQ plus community, where they can connect that way. So as a quick example. So definite positivities. I don't want to sound like I'm all Dr. Downer on social media or AI, but let's now pivot from that and talk about what are some of the potential harms? Like what should parents know about the potential downsides for social media use?
I think what we just talked about, comparison, right? So getting on there, it's really developmentally normal for teenagers especially to compare themselves to pretty much everybody, right? So I think you mentioned it, it's like comparison on steroids, because now you have access to so many other people and you can sit and compare pictures, which by the way, a lot of times are doctored up and not your actual image. But you know what the thing is? Kids know that. Kids will be the first to tell me, you don't believe everything you read on social media, do you? Which I love. Yeah. I love how much kids know and the wisdom they actually have. And sometimes I think we don't give them enough credit. So yeah, the downsides are, if you're already feeling down on yourself and then you're kind of doom scrolling as they say. Also interacting with social media is different than just passively watching it. This is what some studies say. But I think you and I talked about even experts can't agree on whether or not this is all good or all bad. I think we have to look at it as a whole. There is good and there's bad. The parts that I think also kids struggle with is, if there's so what we see in our clinic is a lot of times kids who self-harm or have really depressive symptoms that are isolative. If you're isolated and you're reading about things that kind of feed your depression, then that's going to be harmful, obviously. So that's what I mean about monitoring and using it with our kids. So if you do stumble upon something like that, you can have a healthy discussion with your kids, although it might be hard and uncomfortable. And that's where the parent support really comes in, is supporting parents and having those uncomfortable conversations.
Safety is a really good point too. There's a potential for oversharing, personal identifying information.
Yes. Oh, that's
right.
Yeah.
Right, and getting into other situations like we've talked before about bullying is easier to happen. Right. Say a little more about that. What effects you see in kids on those safety issues? Bullying or even other like predatory type.
So the predatory issues I think happens when there's no monitoring, because I think most of the time kids are actually pretty cautious about what they're sharing because they do learn about it, whether it's from peers or in school or from parents. So I think most of the time nowadays, kids know not to share, like their address or even post, where do they go to school, things like that. Not to say that we shouldn't still talk about it. The reason kids know about it is because we talk about it. So we have to keep talking about it. But then also being able to ascertain the difference between what's an overshare and what's appropriate, because you don't know who's listening and what they're going to do with that information. So something that we see a lot in our office is bullying, and it's usually not in person. It's usually online. I hear stories like, I went to school, everyone's acting fine, I'm part of this friend group, but then online, they're, talking negatively about me or making fun of me, and no one's coming to my defense. Or on group chats, we hear that a lot. It's not exactly social media. I don't know if it counts as social media, but I think the same thing happens in group chats where it goes unmonitored and kids just feel braver. No, not just kids. We all feel braver.
It's easier to bully and be tough when you're not face to face.
You don't have to look at me. You don't have to face my facial expressions or of the peers. I can say whatever I want. And, maybe no one says anything because it's awkward. What happens is the kids that, are being attacked in that way internalize that as fact, or no one came to my defense. That's what I hear a lot in our office. We see kids for depression and anxiety. And when we ask, what are the things that kind of made it worse? It's that no one supported me. No one said anything in the group chat when this person made fun of me. And the other thing about online is that you can't read tone. So we already have a hard time. Some people, especially people who are neurodivergent, have a harder time with tone and jokes or sarcasm. But now when you're online, not only can you not read tone, you can hide behind tone. You can say, oh, I was just kidding. I didn't mean that for real. But if you're in person, there's a lot of other factors like how you said it, what did the other people say or do in real time. But when you're online, you have time to kind of be passive. And I think that can be detrimental for some kids. And the other thing is some people have the proclivity to already be anxious. You're predisposed to that. There's other things going on in your life. And if you're already anxious or depressed and this is going on, it can just prove the point. You see, I knew that no one likes me. You see, this is an evidence of that, which may not actually be evidence of that. It may just be kids all trying to figure it out. Like in middle school, I think that happens a lot, but still in high school too, where kids are trying to figure out their identity and who am I anyway in this world? But sometimes we step on each other by accident or on purpose to figure that out. So social media has just been, I think, a screen to hide behind. That's my long answer.
No, it's great. And what you just touched on, two comments, and might chime in on that. And you kind of talked about how the difference between virtual conversations in face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk to parents about this, I often talk about there's a displacement issue with all electronics, including social media, meaning that the more time you spend offline,
Right.
less time, the more time you spend online, the less time you're spending offline.
Right.
Or the gamers might call it, screen time and green time, like going outside, touching grass, as gamers say. So it really takes away from face-to-face time, as well as other things that are just sometimes more important in life: sleep, getting your homework done, hanging out face-to-face with people that are really important. So to me, I know you have these conversations too, that finding that life balance is really a struggle, especially because these things are they're designed to draw us in and keep us there, right? And they're good at that.
They are good at that, and they're getting better at that. Our attention span is also getting shorter because of it, because there's a formula. I'm not a techie person, but I understand enough to know that there's a formula that works with our dopamine in our brain of wanting more. I actually think that if we explain that to kids of actually any age, that helps them to be more empowered, to decide for themselves what they can and can't do. And I think some parents might hear that and say, oh, my kid will just choose to stay on it. But I think you'd be surprised when you give kids the information. A lot of kids want control, and they don't want someone else controlling their brain, whether it's their parents or the algorithm. So I think it really matters how we approach these topics. When we give kids the autonomy to decide on what to do and have a dialogue with them and say, what do you think about this? How do you think it affects you when you see this stuff? I think you'd be surprised. I'm constantly surprised when I ask kids. They are so intelligent and so wise. And I think it gives me hope for the future of social media and technology, that these kids are going to grow up and then they're going to be in charge of the interwebs. And I hope for that, because then they can kind of come with some wisdom that honestly we don't have yet.
You just touched on something that I want to highlight, which is that when I talk to parents in this space about helping set rules and limits, is that involving your child or teen in that conversation, you wouldn't think about it. We feel as we're the rule setters, the rule followers. It starts with listening and asking, Jenny, what rules do you think should apply? And the things that will come out of them are things, boy, that's even stricter than I would have come up with, right?
I agree.
And in some ways, they want acknowledgement of that. And we tend to think that the more rules we have, we're going to be that parent, then why does everybody else get to do it? But when you don't do that, they actually kind of feel like maybe, well, she doesn't care.
Yes.
I can do whatever I want.
I have actually had many kids say that to my face in my office, and they would never admit it in front of their parents. But they say, they don't care. And I say, how do you know they don't care? They're bringing you here to therapy. And they're like, well, they don't care because they don't have these rules.
I can stay up as late as I want. I can come in whatever time. They don't care how much time I game. We do care.
Totally.
But often the reason for this conversation is we're trying to empower parents to, we all care, but how do we go about it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to not come to your kids scared and fearful yourself, because they're looking to you to be the secure base to say, okay, we got this. We're going to figure this out. I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. But together, we're going to create a plan and see how that works. And then if things about it don't work, we'll adjust that plan. So it empowers, it teaches the kids that, one, they know something about themselves, which goes a long way. And two, they actually know more than we do about many things.
Especially in this space.
Absolutely.
Right.
So including them, making them the experts in something. Now we know that it doesn't work to just say, because I said so. Do that because I said so. It just doesn't work with our generation of kids now, which I love. I love that kids have a voice and they have opinions. That's going to serve them and all of us actually in the world. However, we have to harness that too. We have to have wise conversations with them. We have to be not afraid of difficult conversations.
Thank you.
I think that's what ends up happening.
Yes. And not afraid of making changes. I like to kind of counteract the thought and narrative that, well, Dr. Tulcher or Adelina, this ship has sailed.
Yes, I hear that a lot.
They've been using it for years. It's too late.
It's the world we live in. People say it's the world we live in, which is true.
Throw up our arms and say it is what it is, right?
Right. Both can be true. We
Absolutely.
can embrace and say, yeah, this is where we are. It's not going anywhere. That's the other thing I hear. It is not going anywhere. I agree with that. But we can still keep talking about it. We can take the responsibility that is ours to make it better, like the use of it. You and I were talking about the analogy of cars. Every time we get in a car, we don't dictate to our kids how dangerous it is and all the things that could happen if we get in this car right now. But we do say, put your seatbelt on. We drive safely. hopefully not distracted by our own devices, which is again another irony. So we do the things that we know to keep ourselves safe. But if we did that every time, no kid would want to get in the car. And then our society would also struggle in a different way.
Exactly.
So we have to kind of choose our battles, and every family is different. Every family does have a different relationship with not only social media, by the way, technology in general. And I think that's an important distinction, because technology is a much broader subject than just social media. Social media, you don't have to engage in. I think technology is more inevitable in the world. And then another thing that I wanted to mention is, community with people in your actual community. So parents talking to other parents and saying, hey, what's your plan? When are you going to allow social media? When are you going to give a phone to your kid? Because if kids in the same social circle have about the same restrictions, then it doesn't feel like a restriction. It just feels like status quo.
The norm.
The norm.
For them, for their
Yeah.
group. Yep.
What I hear a lot is, well, all my friends have a phone, or all my friends are on social media and I'm the only one that's not. Well, then that does really hinder that kid's social interactions at school when they're behind because they are, aren't on the group chat. But if all the parents around the same time agree and all the kids are being introduced at the same time with similar messaging, it doesn't feel like someone's being left out, right? It feels like we're all in this together. It's all new for all of us. And that's really hard to get a bunch of parents to kind of agree. But I would say start early on that. See how closely we can get to an agreement about that. And I think the battles will be a little less.
Along those lines, a related question that parents ask a lot, what's the right age, do you think, for, let's just say, social media, to keep it specific to that? There are some mixed opinions out there. There's countries that are banning it at certain ages. There's a move in California to consider banning social media in the state for 16 and under. What are your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, and I think it depends on a lot of things. Back to what I was just saying. I think it depends on the actual community you're in and sort of what's going on there. I think it depends on which social media platform are we talking about. YouTube, I think kids engage in a lot younger because it's videos and it's content. It's a tool kids use for a lot of different things of learning, and parents too use it to look up recipes or how to fix the toilet, so they see us use it. But I think that's very different than like a Snapchat or Instagram where it's instant satisfaction and it's quick. What we do know, some of the research has shown that the longer we have to sustain our attention, the better. So like they say, watch a movie instead of a short, right? So that it helps your brain to sustain the attention. So I would say the same about social media use and the ages. And I think it's really hard for me to say a specific age. I like the range, 14 to 16, I do like. But I would say for a 14-year-old, if they're having an Instagram, for example, I would prefer it to be on a family computer, not on an individual device, and that the family is engaging in the scrolling or whatever together. And that's where I think a lot of parents get awkward.
Yes.
Because the kids don't love it. But if the agreement is you can have it, but we're going to look at it together, I think it really changes the tune. And I actually think a lot of kids will say, well, then never mind. Or they'll say, that's fine.
It might become a self-limiting factor, right?
Or they'll say, that's fine. I want to just look up, this hobby that I have. So that's fine. And then doesn't have to be a stigma around it.
Right.
And you get to learn about your kids that way. You get to take advantage of the algorithm and you get to see what does the algorithm learn about your child, because you're learning about it too, because you're engaging with them. So obviously that's not forever. I would say that's at the beginning, right? And then eventually, naturally with time, it will start to become a little bit more independent. Maybe they eventually get their own device and now it's more private because it's in their hands versus on the family computer, which I think a lot of houses don't have anymore. Just like houses don't have landlines anymore. Yeah. But I've been encouraging families to get landlines and get family computers back because of this, because it allows it to be a family affair, everybody can engage in it. I had a mom once that was so angry about her child's video game usage. And she just felt like the video games were taking her kid away from her. And she didn't even she said, I don't even recognize him anymore. So my challenge was to play video games with him. And she just looked at me like, what?
Like you're an alien.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. Challenged her a few times. She did it. And she came back and said, oh my gosh, I didn't know my kid has all these skills that he is using in this game. Also, we laughed so much together. We laughed the whole time and we had so much fun. And then the next day he asked me to do it again.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
And she said, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
I didn't think my kid wanted to connect with me because that wasn't her experience. Her experience was come be with me, come hang out. And he would.
Games weren't a part of it.
Yeah, but when she went into his world, she got to be with him. And then they started watching funny videos. Anyway, it really grew from there. Wow. But the key there is that they did it together. And it was about the experience that they got to share, just like a movie, right? If you were by yourself in the dark watching a movie, that's different than us, gathering a bunch of people, getting popcorn and say, movie night, come bring your comfy blankets, let's be together.
Absolutely. Well, what a great story. I love that. And it's actually, just to highlight a couple of those tips, it's so important that parents use these things together. Because that's a great example of how it can actually impact your relationship. But also, you can become a better model and mentor when you know what they're doing. So that's just a great example of that. I also would add to, unless they're older, like when they're beyond age 16, where they use it more in their private space or their bedroom, have it in a communal space, all electronics. Yeah. Gaming is a good example. The more they game in a common area, or the more they use social media, even if you're not on a shared device, you're at least in the same room. You can be observant. You can pop down and say, so what are you doing? What are you looking at? You can take those moments where you can share it together, teachable moments. And also, we and our kids and teens need to pay attention to how these devices, these programs make them feel. Right? Things that make you feel like it's positive, it's uplifting, it promotes your socializing, your creativity. Okay, those are positives. But if it makes you angry and irritable and lonely and depressed and anxious, let's talk about limiting those, right?
So what a powerful tool for a kid to have at a young age to understand and have the reflective capacity of how do I feel when I do this thing, whatever that thing is.
Absolutely.
Whether it's video games, whether it's eating this food or eating, not sleeping or being in the sun too much. I had an example of, I used to be a school counselor and I ran this 9th grade trip. It was so much fun, but it was so hard. And no one wanted to drink water or wear sunscreen. And I was the annoying one, like, everybody drink sunscreen. Drink water, put sunscreen, drink. Sure. No one was listening to me. And 2 kids got sunsick, right? They threw up and they felt terrible. And when the rest of the kids watched those 2 suffer, guess what happened the next day? Chug. Everyone was drinking water and everyone wore sunscreen and their hats got, So sometimes we do have to learn, but it's with the protection of the adults that are there to say, okay, those kids, yes, they suffered, but they're okay. They didn't feel very good for a night, but here are the things we could do to prevent that.
Adelina, let's talk now about why social media seems to affect some young people differently than others. Like there have been studies that show, there are mixed studies on this. There was a study I can think of that showed about 2/3 of teens had positive experience with it and 1/3 not so positive. What are some of the factors there?
So I have my theories. I think there's going to be more research coming out and we'll know more soon. Maybe when I say soon, in the coming years. Research takes a long time. Yeah, the research takes a long time, unfortunately. But my theories is kind of what we talked about before. I think some kids are already predisposed to certain struggles. And I think it has to do with all these other factors that right now we're not able to identify because the data doesn't show it. But I think it comes to isolation or lack thereof. I think it comes back to sense of self. So kids who have a strong sense of self, when we see it around the age 8 or 9, kids' sense of self starts to get diminished very easily from the outside world. And that's developmentally appropriate. You know how kids, little kids, toddlers, they're top of the world and nothing can stop them.
In charge and control.
Yeah, they're superheroes. And there's a protectiveness to that. But as they get older, they start to realize that people are judging them and they're different than others. So all of that is totally normal and expected. I just think that if you start out with a lower sense of self, not as strong of an idea of who you are, then you're more susceptible to being swayed a certain way. But then I think those kids that come in sort of saying, well, I don't like that. I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. They're going to be more protected from not just the social media world, by the way, but the real world too. So it's hard because I think the data is not there to know the causality of this. Is that the right way to say it? The causation. But I do think soon we'll have more information about that. And I also think sometimes when you already are feeling depressed, I mean, look at us even as an adult, right? If you're not having a good day, anything that you see will prove what you're already thinking. So I kind of mentioned that before. I think that's another factor as well.
So their baseline mental health has a lot to do with how kids that go into social media,
yeah, how you
usage,
interpret what's coming at you.
That's right.
And your algorithm. So if you stay longer reading a story about a sad story or whatever, it's going to feed you more of those.
Interesting, yeah.
And that's what I was shocked to find out, how actually skilled that algorithm is.
This reminds me of the documentary Social Dilemma that came out about 6-7 years ago.
Yes.
And it's an amazing, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It really teaches this point.
I agree.
Which is that you get to see a kind of it's really a documentary, but it's almost like a bit of a spoof of it, but it's a real message where they've got people in a control room. Oh, he's clicking on this, he lingered, he looked on that, send him more of that. You know, these devices are meant to usually sell things and keep you in there. There's a money, and there's a money side of this, but also what's fascinating about that documentary is the people that are involved in the know in the industry, what they know about this, they restrict their own kids from using it, which is a real
because
flag.
they know how powerful it is.
Exactly.
You know, I think it's a good idea to watch that with your kids. If they're gonna be mature enough and wise enough to use social media, I think they can also handle watching that documentary so that they know. And you know what's a younger version of it is Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph does also a good job of showing, about the internet. And why I like both Wreck-It Ralph and that documentary is that they do a good job of creating a visual for what is otherwise not tangible, which is the internet. You know, Wreck-It Ralph does a beautiful job of making it visual, because otherwise it's like this thing that we can't see. And they make it so that you can kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Along the lines of why some kids have different effects, positive or negative, there's actually some research out there, I believe, that shows that those that use it in a creative way, like if you post content, you respond to others' content, you're not just passively scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and that can be more positive rather than the more passivity is more negative experience for a lot of people. Yeah,
because you're not engaging in it, you're not giving anything to the world, you're just kind of taking. But I think when you volunteer and you give back and you get something out of it, there's something about being reciprocal. We're reciprocal creatures. We're social. We're meant to be giving and taking and receiving. So like even body language, right? We're meant to have a conversation and read each other. Like if all of a sudden I turned my back to you, you'd get a message, right? Even if I didn't say anything. Yeah. And I think there's a way, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen. We're not there yet. There's a way that social media will be adapted to that as well. It's just not there. Right now it's like two-dimensional in that way. So I think that's why that stat is there, that the kids who, like let's say you post your art and you get feedback, oh, we have such beautiful art. There's also going to be people that say, that sucks, why did you post this? But that's the real world.
Those are real human interactions, exactly.
Yeah, and at least you can balance it, you can decide what you want to do with it. I've had kids say, oh, I took off comments. No one can comment on my stuff that I put up because people are mean. This is like an 8-year-old said this to me, who was an actor, was a child actor. And, people are critics and they like to share their criticism. Sure. But this child was wise enough to say, well, I'm just not going to let there be comments. I'm going to take that off. Like I'm going to take control. I'm going to take that opportunity off.
What are some warning signs that parents should be watching for in terms of where they might want to restrict their social media use, like how it can negatively impact them?
I think when you're isolating and you're using that to isolate. So I think it's one thing to isolate, but you're like drawing or you're reading. But if you're using social media to isolate, it's not actually isolating. You're consuming, but you're not interacting. So isolation, I think when it starts to affect sleep or appetite. So I have kids that say, I forgot to eat all day. And then when you start to ask questions, did you forget to eat? Or were you just weren't paying attention to your cues that you were hungry? And then this is where it gets murky, is that kids who are depressed and or have anxiety, the things that get affected quickly, sleep and appetite.
That's right.
And isolation. So to me, that's when it starts to cross over between regular usage to problematic.
There you go. So
when it starts to affect function.
There you go. So if your child or teen, hopefully teenager, if it's social media, is showing signs that it's actually making them worse or contributing to anxiety or depression, or they're increasingly withdrawn or isolated, there's a you touched on this earlier. There's a big debate in the field that there's a correlation between the amount of time people and all ages spend on social media and mental health. But whether it's cause or just a coexisting together correlation is still not to be proven. Maybe there is some evidence that those who are more prone to anxiety and depression are going to do more passive use, which might be a factor in their depression and anxiety, right? Yes. I mean, so we can't discount it, but we can't say it causes all of it.
Exactly, and it's hard to uncouple that right now.
Yes.
Because it's sort of like, which one came first, the chicken or the egg, you know?
Exactly.
And then another thing I want to say about your last question is, ask your kids, if they think that their usage is affecting their mental health or their functioning. Most of the time you'll get a quick eye roll and no, definitely not. Kind of like the statistic you shared at the beginning, that they can see that their friends are negatively impacted, but maybe not so much themselves. But I still think asking the question is important. Even if you're pretty guaranteed that your answer is going to be an eye roll and a no, it encourages reflection and it encourages your child to think for themselves. But when you ask the question, it has to be an actual question, not a leading question.
Not a lead into the rule or to the... Right.
Yeah, or don't you think this is affecting... It has to be a genuine curiosity, because otherwise you're going to just get the door in your face. So I really encourage parents to slow down, check themselves, check what's coming up for you. Because I think a lot of times it's fear that's coming up for us as parents. Like, have I lost control? Is this dangerous? Is my child in danger? Did I do this? Did I let this happen? Right? That's normal for parents. Yeah. So I would say first do your own work, do your own reflection, and then genuinely ask your child to think about pros and cons. That's a good way to put it. Instead of just saying, is this a problem? What do you like about it? How does this help you in your mood and your mental health? And how does it maybe make it harder for you to cope with some of the things we know that are hard for you? And a lot of times that can open an actual dialogue.
Gotcha. I want to pivot a little bit and just kind of touch on artificial intelligence and a growing use. So it's everywhere.
Quickly growing.
Like amazing, like exploding, right? Yeah. And I don't know about you, I use it daily. It helps me be a better doctor. There's obviously educational and learning uses. You can get rapid information. But there have been some concerning stories in the media and over the last year and a half about AI companions and AI chatbots that are really just causing some, they're fun, you can learn, but it's really kind of a pseudo-human interaction, right? And so there have been some kids out there that have been encouraged in some things that they were thinking to do. So touch on that. Do you see or hear much about that?
I don't yet, because I think the kids that we see, maybe it hasn't caught up, I think. But the kids that we see have already been struggling. This is so new that I think it's gonna catch up to us. But I would say the same exact thing I said before about making sure kids know how AI bots and the companions, how are they built? What are they meant for? How do they work? They're gonna be, agreeable to you. Yes. So know that, right? Know that when you give it information and you ask it questions, it's gonna probably agree with you. Yep. So is that what you're looking for? Because I do think that's what people are looking for. And
who doesn't love affirmation?
Totally,
right?
It feels really good. But I think if you go into it knowing that, you're less likely to be fooled by it. So I think that's number one. Again, you can see my theme.
These things are meant to be agreeable.
Yeah, they're meant to be agreeable. So use it that way, because you know that, right? When you ask it something, you know how to use it. But I think kids just need to know the information about how it's created. And sometimes kids know more than we do, like I said, about how AI even works. But I think the challenge with that one is how quickly it's growing.
Yes. Without regulation, without even awareness of the potential downsides. I got asked about it one time about 6 months ago, what my thoughts were. And I'll be honest, I hadn't formulated all my thoughts yet on it. So I've done a bit of diving in the last few months. And so now when it does come up or I get a chance to bring it up, I think you touched on this, but I want to expand on hammering home the fact that we need to teach our kids what these are, that they're not human. Yeah. They're not human. They feel that way. They talk that way.
They're amazingly meant to feel that way.
That's right. They're meant to mimic what they've been programmed or what they find out through the web and also reflect back on you. So they're very affirming. They can't think or feel. And the key for me is they don't really have a good sense of right or wrong, good or bad, which is why sometimes our kids' ideas that they might express to this companion might be wrong, harmful, potentially dangerous in the area of, like, there was a report of a child that was considering self-harm.
Yeah.
And rather than discouraging the child, the companion encouraged it. And there's a lawsuit over that now.
Okay, but because of that lawsuit,
Yeah.
it's now getting better at knowing the difference between, just in the last few weeks, it's getting better. But that's also dangerous, because the more we rely on it knowing the difference between good and bad, it doesn't allow our kids and us to think about for ourselves what we think is good or bad. Right? So I'm glad that that's been adjusted, but there's also concerns about if it's so good at knowing the difference between good and bad, then you're relying on it knowing good and bad. And I feel like if you have a room full of 5 people, everyone's going to have a slightly different opinion, right?
Bingo.
So
the designers might have a different idea of where that line is drawn than we might have as parents,
and
right?
maybe there's context that the AI doesn't know because it's only given what it's given, right? So I think that's what I like to tell kids, is the information. Like, you just gave it that information, but it doesn't know this and this and this and this. And then we could give it all that information, but there's always going to be more that it could know. And the scary part is that it is getting better. So that's the part I worry about. If we say this right now, in like a month, this whole conversation might be totally moot.
Amazing,
because it will be so different, you know? So I just
we might have to do another one of these. And
we'll just keep talking about it. But that's the point, right? We have to keep learning.
Yes.
And we have to keep on top of it as parents so that we can, and if we don't know something, we can say to our kids, you know what? I don't know. Let me find out. And not just do a quick Google search, right? Because we want to model that we don't take just what's off the top. We use discretion. Like, what's the source that I'm reading, right? Wikipedia is not the same as a scholastic journal. And so those are the things that I think we need to vocalize to our kids. This is what I'm reading, and this is why I think it's legitimate. And this is why this article that's from, like The Onion or whatever, it doesn't make it legitimate.
I worry about the emotional dependence that kids might have on these kind of like pseudo-unrealistic, pseudo-human interactions that just affirm, and maybe now hopefully challenge ideas that are dangerous or unhealthy or unsafe, but that they maybe withdraw and prefer artificial to real interactions.
Yeah, because it's kind of like how sometimes we prefer, like processed food because it's the same every time versus fruit. It's like sometimes it's kind of not a good strawberry and you got to toss that out. That's a little less convenient, right? And so I think you're right that all this, it's going to be more consistent, it's going to be more reliable, so it's going to feel probably good. And you don't have to feel the uncomfortableness of a real person not liking you for a minute or, being uncomfortable by something you said. And I think it comes back to educating everybody, staying educated. And for kids, especially when they're building their sense of self, it's not the worst thing for a bot to tell you how great you are, but it just depends on the situation, depends on the context. If you're like, I'm a terrible baseball player, I want to quit, and the AI is telling you, no, you got this many, home runs, and you're great, your team. So that's not the worst thing, But if you're saying to the person that, all my friends hate me, and then they're like, yeah, all your friends seem to not like you based on this data, then that's where it goes.
Or I hate my parents, they won't let me do this. You go, yeah, I can see why you'd be upset at your parents. I would not like them either. I mean, that's the kind of affirmation you don't need, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like how you go to a certain friend because you're going to get that answer from your friend that you're looking for.
Right.
It's sort of the same thing. It's just artificial.
Right. So let's kind of end with some tips for parents. Just kind of a quick summary of, we've actually touched on a lot of them already. Like, one of my favorite tips, and we touched on it many times, I want to hammer it home, talk with your kids about social media, explain to them how you use it, have that conversation regularly because you're their best model and mentor, right? Any other thoughts on what you think parents ought to be doing?
I think be honest. So be honest with your own shortcomings. Be honest about how hard it is for you to disengage at times. When you wake up in the morning, do you go check your phone? That's modeling. But I think kids really respect when their parents are willing to admit that they're not perfect.
Right.
So willing to admit that they don't know everything about social media or devices, and engaging the kids to ask them what they think, like we already talked about. Stay curious. I always give the Columbo example. Do you remember Columbo, the show?
Yeah.
Columbo? he's
Ask a lot of questions.
Ask a lot of questions. You may think you're the expert on something, but if you just kind of make yourself a little bit like not the pro on it, you'll be amazed how kids think they are the pro on things.
That's so true.
And so you kind of say like, wait, what does that mean? What does that even stand for? I don't know anything about this. Kids will likely say, well, I do, and they'll teach you. So I think that's a really important tool, and also empowers kids when you do that. Stay curious, stay honest, and stay consistent. I think a lot of times we do one thing and say another, or say one thing and do another. And that's confusing for kids. Yeah, absolutely. And they'll call you out on it real quick.
Yeah.
Or they
can
won't.
Spot hypocrisy a mile away.
Yes. Or sometimes they won't call it out, but they just don't know what to make of it. No. And that's even actually sometimes worse.
Okay. And then I guess I'll just piggyback a couple that we touched on earlier. Safety. Talk to your kids about safety. Get to know the parent controls on a lot of these devices and apps.
And other parents. Get to know other parents.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that home. Having conversations with the parents of your kids' friends.
Peers, yeah.
So you can support each other through this. So you said earlier, we might be an expert on psychology and pediatrics, but parents are the experts on their kids.
Absolutely.
Nobody knows your child like you.
Absolutely.
So make sure that you're active in this space, not passive, to use another example that we used earlier.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid, and it's never too late to make positive changes. The ship might have sailed partially, but it's not done sailing, okay? Thank you.
Yeah,
great conversation. This was a lot of fun. Hope it's helpful to everybody out there, and thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, and I don't think you're a negative doctor about it. What did you say?
Dr.
Dr. Downer. You're not Dr. Downer. You're great at holding both.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you for that.
We love affirmation. Okay.
See, I'm not a bot.
Thanks again. Bye, everybody.